So we are here today with George Parrish. George is an angel investor. If we talk then about, let's say, pitch decks and how to put one together, and I totally hear what you're saying, George, that it depends on the investor and it depends on the company. But are there common themes or common things that you see in successful pitch decks?
Oh yeah, very, very successful. Very successful pitch decks talk more about the business solution that is being presented as opposed to the business problem that they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
I've seen unsuccessful pitches where the entrepreneur gets up and in a 3-minute pitch spends 2 minutes and 40 seconds talking about his intro, his team, the business problem they're solving, and then he races through the last 20 seconds of his speech trying to get to the thing that I'm interested in about. I don't need to be told, what the business problem is and, a lot of other things that they think is very important. I'm there for the solution. That's what sets them apart in this game and everything. So, it's a very easy formula. I'm part of, Society 3, the business accelerator out of Berlin, Zurich, and San Francisco now. And at our pitch events, entrepreneurs are only given 3 minutes to pitch, and they're only allowed 5 slides.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow. Okay.
So, and that first slide is their entrance slide that gives us the title of the company.
Yeah.
Second slide is the business problem. The third slide, to me the most important slide, is the business solution slide. Fourth slide is the team slide. And the fifth slide is really a reiteration of the first slide. And it says, name a company, Q&A, thanks for coming. So two of those 5 slides are basically intro and closing in the same thing. So the meat of the production of what I'm about to see better fall into business problem, business solution, and team. That's really, really, really what I'm interested in hearing.
Those are, and then, which is, you just answered the next question. That was a perfect segue.
Okay.
So which is fantastic, because what are the 3 key messages an investor should receive from the deck? It's what the business problem, business solution, and the team.
The team.
Okay.
Now that's going to vary a lot depending upon the event that you're at.
Yeah.
The amount of time that's given to the entrepreneur. There's an event here in town, SF Startup Showcase Shark Tank. You only get 2 minutes to pitch. You don't get any slides. You're part of usually one of 20. The event is terrific. It's a great event. Our event, we feel, is a very, very good event. There's another event called Pitch Force in town. That is the entrepreneurs have 8 to 10 minutes. And, there are other, events. Sometimes you get 2, sometimes you get 3, sometimes you get 5, sometimes you get 8. Now, if you follow the path of most entrepreneurs that go through these events and everything, you can see entrepreneurs that kill it at 2 and the 3-minute pitches. And I've seen those same entrepreneurs at an 8-minute pitch run out of gas in 6 minutes and everything. So working with a pitch coach helps you kind of get over those hurdles that and there are different business problems that come up for every entrepreneur depending upon the length of the pitch that you have to address. And you got to be able to fall out of bed and do this thing, coming out of your sleep.
Sure.
And most entrepreneurs are not that good the first time around. And they're getting a little better by the 3rd time around, but by the time they've done it 6 or 7 times, you don't even recognize them from the first pitch. That's a different person up there in front of a group of people. Doesn't even matter if they're pitching in front of 400 or 500 people, or 30 people, or 10 people. It's amazing to see the growth. So there's a pitch event every night in this town. And for an entrepreneur not to be taking advantage of first of all, the free events that are out there,
yeah.
And there are a ton of them, and then going to the other events to get the exposure that he gets, that tells me a lot about the entrepreneur. I've seen some great, great, great stuff. I really have. And it's not surprising that the effectiveness of the pitch helps people get funding of some kind,
yeah.
And I've seen other people, not so hot, also get funding.
Interesting.
Because they were in the right place at the right time with the right investor who, maybe he just came on the block. Maybe he just came into some money. Maybe he thinks that's the greatest thing since pancakes. Maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. I think it could be a combination of all the above. I mean, it could, but we'll see, just when you think you know everything about this business vertical, you run into something where you just go, well, okay, all right, that's something else I got to file away.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
it just if there were all hard and true answers, this would be a real easy vertical to understand, and there aren't a lot of hard truths to this thing between the entrepreneur, the investor, and is it adversarial? Well, if the entrepreneur wants to make it adversarial, it can turn into that in a hurry. If the entrepreneur opens himself up to the fact that he might not know everything that's going on in this business vertical, and it's a learning experience for him as well until he gets the money in-house to be able to help him scale or whatever the heck he wants to do with his company, that's another thing too.
Yeah. And when because you work as a pitch coach,
Yeah.
as part of your work,
Right.
and you just mentioned a minute ago, you've seen some co-founders or some pitches that just really knocked it out, did a great job.
Yeah, just amazing.
What was it about those pitches that really resonated with you?
Well, I found out that they were graduates of some of the best business accelerators in town and everything. That helped because the top business accelerators take their entrepreneurs and they literally take apart their decks slide by slide, work with them, teach them how to enunciate, how to use the right gestures even, you know, when you're doing something. Not to put your hands in your pockets while you're pitching and everything, not to come to a pitch reading your pitch off of cards. I felt so sorry for one engineer at one event. He was shaking, visibly shaking, and trying to get through it with a piece of paper in his hands. And you want to know something? His idea really was pretty good.
Yeah.
It really was. But, you know, at that point, he was just so nervous. You kind of knew, yeah, he might be the president of the company, but he may not ever be the CEO of his own company. But, you know, and he certainly can't be the spokesman of his company.
Yeah.
But he could really, you know, be the brains behind his portion of that company. And yeah, I've seen everything from that. I've seen people break down and cry.
Oh, wow.
I've seen mean judges tear into people and bring grown men to tears. And I've seen other people be very, very supportive of those same entrepreneurs at other events. So it kind of is every angel and VC investor a mean, you know, what is it, was that John, who was the Barrymore in the Jimmy Stewart movie with the wings and everything? He played the banker.
I know exactly.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I mean, everybody thinks that all the investors.
I know exactly. Yes.
Okay, so everybody thinks all the investors are like
Mr. Potter.
Mr. Potter. There you go. And they're all Mr. Potters. Well, no, they're not. No, they're not. And but you know, what the entrepreneur also has to know is that there is a limit to usually how much capital every investor has to invest.
Yeah.
And when you invest, your money's tied up for 5 to 7 years with a lot of companies. And if you have an endless supply of capital and funding, that's great.
Yeah.
But most investors, you know, there is, you know, kind of a limit to it. I mean, there really is, you know. I mean, either that or their family members start taking hatchets to them in their sleep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, they have to. So there's just an unlimited amount of funds for every investor. Every entrepreneur has to know that. Okay.
And you mentioned, George, some of the leading accelerators that you in let's say in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the ones
Sure,
that impress you the most?
Sure, I can. 500. Well, you know, the big three are 500 startups, Y Combinator. Idea to IPO is getting there, and Rocket Space is incredible. You know, they do a great job. The business accelerator that I belong to, Society 3, is doing something where we're actually challenging the whole idea of how long it takes to get through a business accelerator. So in April of this year, there's going to be a 1-week accelerator in Lucerne.
Wow.
And you know, most of them are at 6, 8, 10, and 12 weeks.
Yeah.
They do a very, very good job. But they're going back and we're looking at the way the companies that we have kind of sent off into the world and how successful they've been. And the meat and potatoes of what they've used really could be condensed and not spread out over a whole month and everything. So We do something that's very, very different. The previous companies that I mentioned and everything, when they're graduating companies to go off into the great beyond, they take a percentage of their equity.
Yeah.
Society 3 takes no percentage of the equity. Now you got to pay us to go through the accelerator. Now that's the big difference, but you come out of the accelerator with 100% of your equity still intact. So once you start, you think that giving 7 to 10% of your company is not such a big deal at the very beginning after you graduate from anybody's accelerator. But if you're in that rare instance where you're one of the companies that takes off and starts to gain traction right away and gets to $3 million in revenue, well, your 10% of equity investment just became $300K. And that's how much, you never had to give away if you kind of went with somebody else and everything and start thinking about this in advance. But there's no doubt, they all are very, very good at what they do. And there are plenty of startups out there there's plenty of business for everybody, And like I said before, there's 7,600 accelerators in the world, so somebody is going great guns. If you go, one of the things we found out about working out of Berlin, every single day, 20 new businesses incorporate. 20 new startup businesses incorporate every single day.
Wow.
And then when they get off that plane at SFO or down in San Jose, they're ready to go.
Yeah.
They're competitive with all American startups, and it's the same as startups from Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, wherever the heck they're coming from here. These people aren't wasting any time. They're here because either the infrastructure is not there in the countries where they're coming from, or they have zero GDP growth, which means you can't sustain a startup economy like we have here, with the billions of dollars that are being poured into this in San Francisco all the way down to San Jose. No wonder they're all coming here. It just boggles the mind how much money is at play.
That's an important point. So, and you mentioned some reasons why they should come here: infrastructure, funding,
right.
Expertise. What are some reasons that a startup team might not want to come to Silicon Valley, or let's say maybe delay it some?
It's incredibly expensive to live here.
Oh, great.
It just is. The cost of just getting an apartment and buying food and knowing that you might need that car to get around somebody, because if you have to be in San Jose in the early part of the day and you have to be in San Francisco 3 hours later, you don't want to be relying on the train or the buses to be able to get you to your appointments. You got to get to your appointments. And if you don't make it and you can't get back in the door with somebody that you need to see, it's on you. It's not on anybody else. So it is incredibly expensive to live here. That's one of the reasons why at our pitch event we're still doing it for free, because we feel there's enough people in the pocket of every entrepreneur already that we can afford to pay the rent. Nobody has to pay us to pitch at this point. And we can pick up that tab easily. What we're there for, not so much is for our own gain and glory and access to the mighty and the powerful. It's to help the entrepreneur get to the next level. That's the most important part of why we as entrepreneurs, in the pitch space, want to help other entrepreneurs progress, gain traction, go yonder, succeed, those kinds of things. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned, one of the accelerator that you're involved with, so they pay to go through it.
Yeah.
And that's
Society3.com.
Okay. Society3.com. So is that the first accelerator doing that, or are there others doing that?
There are a few. Okay. There are a few doing that, but the model is to go get in.
Yeah.
They take care of everything. They don't cover your expenses, or your room and board and everything, but they cover your training. And then for that, and having 500 angels and VCs at your graduation ceremony, you're going to wind up you give the accelerator 7%, and if the angel and the VC wants a cut of the action too, that can start to escalate before your first round of funding, and already, like I said, you got to hang on to 50.1%. All right, you can only give up 49.9%. If you've already given up 15%, and you haven't even hit the streets yet, you could see how how much equity you can give in future rounds where you got to go through and try to raise funds to grow, to add headcount, to do whatever the heck it is that you need to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
That's really helpful. When you think about what do you? I'm talking about now traction. So when you're looking for traction in startups, what kind of things are you looking for?
Well, it's got to come from one of two ways, okay? And it cannot come from either of these things. The traction that I want to see can be either coming from the marketing side or the sales side, okay? I want to see it from the sales side. It's from learning how to speak my language, again, going back to this. I mean, I'm an old enterprise software sales guy, so I'm interested in revenue. I don't want to hear any excuses about how you can't sell, don't know how to sell. Our SaaS model is failing us because the incoming business leads are, I don't want to hear this. Okay. But on the marketing side, especially on the social media side, there's no reason in the world why companies cannot scale from 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000 followers in a year. If they can't hit those numbers, if it takes them 3 years just to get to 100,000, that tells me somebody doesn't know what the heck they're doing, or, whatever the heck they've been doing hasn't been working. There's nothing wrong with doing something that doesn't work, but you have to be able to pivot, spin, and go try something else, and just banging your head up against the wall the same way over and over and over again just doesn't do any good. I'm going back to the team where the emphasis on team. If I see somebody making the same mistake over and over and over again, it's just not me that's not going to invest. It could be anybody.
So you bring up an important point in teams, which are obviously very important. How do you assess teams?
Well, you look at a number of things. First of all, you want to find out if they all have MBAs. If they don't have MBAs, that's not a criteria, but if they do have them, that's great. All right. If they come from a big name school, that's always a good sign. But more so, what's more important than that is that they had any startup experience at all. I don't care if they've had a successful exit or not. What I do care about is they've gone through the process. That's the important part, because the exit is something that can be very short term. It could be 8 years down the road. You'll never know. Nobody ever knows. I mean, the market determines all this, and after a while. But if you're looking at these kinds of things over and over and over again, that becomes a barometer. If they don't have any startup experience, they don't have college degrees, what have they been spending their time doing in their lives? Then you're down to another level of, I got to go out and find out, what's making these guys tick. Then I got to almost be on site to see what the heck they're doing, because, talking a great game doesn't mean anything. It's all results. I mean, that's all it is. So does that help?
Totally, very helpful.
Yeah,
very helpful. Thank you, George. And then also, when you think about company culture, in terms of the companies the startups that you're coaching, are there common culture problems that you see?
Yeah. And
what are those?
The most common culture problem that I see, and this was filmed at our last pitch event. Axel Schultz, our founder, talked about how he was trying to get a CFO on board with him and the startup that he had and the company that he had in the past. But he didn't want to get him for free. And he knew the guy had $200,000 to his name, and he wanted him to come aboard and put the $200,000 into a company that he'd already put 7 figures into. So he said, look, he says, I'm waking up and I'm going home every night with this much stress to be able to get this company over the hump. He says, I want everybody on that C-level with me with that level of stress, because if it fails, everybody's in the same ballpark and they're in the same condition after that thing fails. If we succeed as a group, then we wildly succeed in everything. And that's the one thing I kind of see goes on. You go out and you do your first round of hires and everything, and maybe you give them some piece of the business and maybe you don't. And then the guys that are in charge and, the founders of the company, yeah, they're walking around, their hair is turning gray prematurely, they're starting to put on weight in the wrong places and everything, and you can see their blood pressure rising as you walk into the room. Well, if every member of that team is not invested as heavily as them, either emotionally or financially, that causes problems. And that causes, I think, a culture that when somebody looks to you and says, are you telling me that our sales team is responsible for all sales in the future of this company? Well, yeah, you're the only revenue generating part of that company. Yeah, so you are kind of responsible. So if you can't handle the stress and embrace it and learn to embrace it, you're going to have problems in that particular area. Yeah, revenue is a good thing.
We love revenue.
Yeah, we do love revenue, don't we? Yeah,
we love
yeah.
And then, George, even as you were saying that, it was reminding me of the phrase, does the person have skin in the game? So to your point,
Sure.
you know, so that's really interesting. And please.
Sorry, and by the way, Axel and the CFO did get together. He put the $200,000 in. He's now the CEO of that company. Revenues last year were around $850 million. So there was a good ending to that story. I just forgot to tell you that. Okay.
We love love those types of endings as well.
Yeah.
And so when, let's say then, either when you or investors in general, they receive a pitch deck or an introduction, to say a warm introduction,
right,
and then that gets let's say a first meeting,
right,
or maybe they pitch, they're at a pitch event, and that leads to a first meeting. What recommendations do you have for founders about how to prepare for that meeting?
Ask the investor what's important to them. You know, it's really that simple.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when you go out and you're trying to get your foot inside the door of a Fortune 500 company, and when you walk in and, you know, somebody is nice enough to take time out of their business day to see you, they're under no obligation to see vendors. I mean, they're really not. But if they decide that there's a business problem that they have that they think you might be able to help them solve, you know, and they invite you in, you got to know what to say, how long that you can stay there, and you got to know how to gracefully get out of there and know that you've done what you needed to do at that particular meeting, all right? And part of the way you formulate your answers to something like that is when you walk into that scenario, you say, what's the one thing that's driving you crazy today that you can't get your arms wrapped around? And if your solution doesn't match what that is, or if it's close to that kind of thing, you're wasting their time. It doesn't matter if you got on a plane, San Francisco, flew all the way to New York and everything, you just waste your time. You never ask the most simple, basic questions, because you'll always be the third, the fourth, the fifth, or the sixth solution for them to the business problem that they have is driving them crazy. You want to be up one or two there to be able to get some kind of, you know, get the problem resolved, get the deal done. You know, that's why some of these large enterprise software deals take 12 months, 18 months to close and everything. And, you know, you can always cut the time down and everything in these deals by just asking somebody, what can I do to help you? You know, sometimes the hardest part in sales is not knowing what to say, but just learning how to listen.
That's great advice. That's great advice. And so, before we started today, you had mentioned, George, that when you're either judging a pitch event, that quite often you'll ask some questions where there may not necessarily be a right answer, but you're kind of looking for. Yeah. Can you talk about that question?
Sure. When I first started out judging pitch events a few years ago, I used to think that 75% of the technology solution that was being pitched was the most important part, and 25% of the team might be important to the company that you were talking to. And as the years have gone by, everything is really, really flipped. And now I'm looking at really 60 to 65% of anybody's pitch really is important about what the team is and the constitutes the members of that team. You know, the background, we talked about that before. Maybe 20 to 25% might be the technology solution, and maybe 5 or 10% execution and everything, and how that team is going to execute that solution. That leads to a lot of interesting things where I start plugging in right away. My radar kind of goes off. Bells start happening. When you start, I mean, we had a company at our pitch event. The very last team. When you're listening to them, you just know they're right. You know, they're right. You know, had no idea where they were from before their pitch. Afterwards, we go talk, found out they're all from Google. You know, it's all I needed to know. I mean, I immediately called a friend of mine, Roger King of Bay Angels, and I said, Roger, you should probably bring these guys in for a cup of coffee because they're right up your alley. And Roger said, yeah, okay. And they've already gone over there and started discussions with Bay Angels. So these are the kind of things where, you know, you try to find these things when they do happen to, man, don't let them out of the room until you find a way to help them, you know, because that's why they're there. They're asking for these things.
And then, so that's interesting because you said, like, with that team, you could tell that you knew that they were right.
Yeah.
Was that, how did you know that? Was it based on the logic or the persuasiveness or the argument?
No, it was a combination of everything. It was a combination of having a very effective pitch as opposed to having an ineffective pitch. It was a combination of having the right team. And when you looked at them, you kind of said, okay, all right, the combination of the business solution in the business vertical that they're playing, you know, they're not in a position. They're actually kind of coming in early. We're only about, there's 15% of the business vertical has been touched already. So there's still a lot of play left in that business vertical. So it's a combination of a lot of different factors. You know? It might necessarily be the business vertical that I'm interested in, but you could tell these guys had it together.
Yeah. And then, so it's interesting that you gave an example there, George, where you then contacted a friend of yours.
Yeah.
So this is that how common is that normally how the business works?
No, it's how I work.
Yeah, it's how you work.
It's how I work. I mean, everybody's different. I mean, you know, some people will not operate that way because they say, why give somebody else an opportunity, and why I should be making that money, and you know. But there's a certain point in your life where you realize, well, how much is enough? I mean, how much money do you need to be happy? I mean, what's important to you? I mean, you know, if you're not asking those kind of self-reflective questions yourself, how can you pass that kind of guidance along to people that you're working with and everything?
Yeah.
I mean, people know when they've walked into the room and Beelzebub is sitting across the table from them. You know, they know. They don't have to be told. You know, the guy doesn't have to be wearing, you know, horns and a tail and pitchfork and dressed in red from head to toe. I mean, you just know. I mean, this person is no good. This person is evil. This person is somebody I do not want to do business with. I mean, they know. They know, right? Okay?
Okay. And then also, just in terms of founding teams when they're either presenting metrics or financial projections, and I know, and you spoke about revenue earlier, are there any other things in particular you're looking for in addition to what, in terms of revenue and some of the other engagement metrics?
The first 7 figures is the hardest that they get to. It depends on how fast they got there, you know. Some people it takes, gosh, it can happen as fast as 3 months, you know, more likely closer to a year. And once they get to a year, there better be a projection number in there. About, you know, year 2 better be 3 million, year 3 better be 9. 9 times 3 is 27, 20, you know, just up all of the scale. That's pretty much the scale that everybody's looking for. They want to see that kind of growth projection there.
Kind of 1 million, 3 million, 9 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then when you, in terms of angels, is there a range of investment size that angels normally make? And if so, what is that?
It really just depends on the angel. It really is. I mean, if he's in a position where companies of his clients have succeeded in being sold, then he's going to have a lot more capital to work than the guy who's still really got 6 or 7 that haven't and everything. So, I mean, it really depends. I mean, you know, and there are no metrics or analytics that can tell you that, but actually on the angel list it will tell you size of last deal, when the last deal occurred and everything. So, pretty easy to find out.